don't think about work-life balance. Think about work-life continuum. Enjoy what you do. It should all, if you can make it blend in, you can be happy, you will win.
That's 2 ounces, but we're only giving you 1 coin.
Great. Damn it, I was hoping for a second coin. 55% of Blade's business is moving human organs for transplant.
Okay.
We are the largest air transporter of human organs in the United States. So by the way, it's always the unsexy businesses, as Mike knows, that make all this incredible money. Blade Passenger does well, but the medical business, I have to admit, is terrific economics.
We're back at Business Untitled. Our dear friend Mel is late, and so we're going to start without him, and he's going to have to pay $100 to the tip jar. Couldn't be more excited. We've had a lot of wolf packs recently. This show started with bringing on world-class entrepreneurs to hear their stories and learn from them. And today we've got Rob Wiesenthal. Had to say that 3 times to get it right. I don't know why. I've been up too late. Founder of Blade. It's one of the cooler companies, especially if you're a New Yorker. And so, Rob, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
And Dave's here. Dave got here on time.
Yeah, I got here on time. I'm always on time. But Blade's cool, man. Mike and I take it. Well, you don't take it so much because Mike has his own seaplane, which I jump on now and then. But I'm a regular Blade customer from one of the 2 New York rivers to East Hampton. Good. So it's a great service. So,
how'd you think of it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, when I was, my career started after University of Rochester. I went into investment banking and with a goal towards going to media. And I was at Sony Corporation. I was CFO there. I was there at Sony for 15 years. And they actually had a helicopter that really wasn't being used. And so we put it on a certificate to allow it to be chartered. And it cost about $6,000 for people to charter it to go to the airport, just do anything, like 3-hour call-out times, and back then faxes and credit cards and wires. And
What year was that?
2000. I was at Sony from 2000 to 2013. I started messing around with thinking about this in the early aughts. And mobile technology was just kind of starting getting out there, and said, well, what if you could aggregate people and get the price down to something that is somewhat affordable? And then I heard a story about some relatively wealthy guy who was with a friend. They went to the heliport, and they both had chartered helicopters. One gets in his, the other guy gets in the other one, and they both fly out to Long Island, and they get out, and they're like, this makes no sense. We've now paid $12,000. So we started out and we got the price of a seat down to $595 to go to the Hamptons. And now about 5 years ago, we got the price of a helicopter flight from Manhattan to the airport to JFK or Newark down to the price of an Uber Black. It's $195 now.
Yeah.
And so...
The only way to go to the airport.
Yeah, the only way. I mean, 5 minutes instead of 2-hour drive.
Yeah.
And so that whole idea of, can you aggregate people using mobile technology, and then also make the experience, generally, aviation companies are run by pilots. Mm-hmm. And there isn't a hospitality element. There isn't an element of creating an emotional connection with people, as we do, and Mel knows, in entertainment, and creating brands and create that kind of feel where, now in New York, Blade's a verb. You blaze the airport, you blaze the ham. So it's been terrific.
Yeah. I was a helicopter pilot in the New Jersey National Guard, and that's before the National Guard was used for real battle. It was kind of a flying club. And Sony's pilot, this would have been in like 88, 89, 90. Sony's pilot was one of my guys.
Oh, in New Jersey.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that pilot. I do remember him. A very talented pilot.
Well, they
too.
were all ex-Vietnam vets, all Air America. They were such amazing pilots. And I'd show up there and I'd say, all right, guys, I'm a young second lieutenant. This is what we're going to do. They'd be like, screw you, Lieutenant. This is what we're going to do. I was like, okay. But man, oh man, they taught me a lot about flying. Yeah. So it's funny small world.
You know your company's successful when it becomes a verb.
Yeah,
right?
It's definitely one of the things we're proud of.
Yeah.
It's and also the idea when we started, 80% of the people that flew us never been in a helicopter before or a seaplane. That's interesting. And so it was just this thought, and back in when you think about a helicopter back in the 80s or 90s, there's that image in an ad of like, two guys getting off a big helicopter, and they're both in suits, and one guy's handing them the documents, and it was just really like this kind of corporate if you're CEO, you take it was never considered something a consumer would use. And then we noticed, as we started the company, I was CEO of Warner Music, and I incubated the idea. I actually started the company, didn't join the company until 2 years after Warner's. I left Warner's and joined the company, raised money. But what was happening, it was clear that with electric vehicles, that the battle on the ground with EV was going to happen in the air. And that the biggest issue with helicopters was sound and noise, and people were starting to solve that problem. And as you know, there are not a lot of places to land. Back in the 70s, we were landing on top of the Pan Am building, which is now the MetLife building. There was a 61st Street heliport. Helicopters were just the greatest thing. Airlines integrated them. It was...
if you go to Sao Paulo,
it's
still like so cool
on top of every building.
On every building.
Yeah, and
it's the only place I've ever seen that.
Yeah, and I think with it was all about noise, and what's exciting about this next generation of aircraft, and frankly, it was the premise of us going public in 2021. Is like, how do we accelerate the transition from helicopters to what they call eVTOL, electric vertical aircraft, and when you take away noise, you have more landing zones.
Right.
And with every pair of landing zones, it's more convenient for
Have you started
flyers.
with them yet? I haven't seen them.
Have what?
But they look like drones, basically.
Yeah.
They're not certified yet.
Right.
They're being tested with some great companies like Joby and others.
Joby, right. That's the
and they're flying. And the certification process is a long process. But the idea is when you have that, and these are aircraft that literally are quiet on takeoff and silent on overflight.
Yeah.
And the noise or the noise footprint or people, it's generally when it's flying over people. That's when it's going to pack the most people.
Yeah.
So the hope is that when it's quiet, we'll have more landing zones.
Right.
And I think that's what's exciting. That's what it builds your addressable market. New York is probably where we operate. In New York, we also operate in the south of France. Nice, Monaco, Cannes, Saint-Tropez, Courchevel, Geneva. Obviously, really high end, great landing zones. Any place that is either geographically contested or highly congested are great markets for this. And the two biggest markets are New York and Southern Europe, only because of their places to land.
Right.
So once the unlock is going to be quiet, because once you can show a city, a state, look, this is quiet, it's emission free.
Yep.
We want to be able to land. More people flying, lower costs. It becomes a real opportunity to enhance the amount of transportation you have.
Yeah. I guess it's like you need a density, right? You also are not kind of like a hub and spoke thing, right? You got to be direct, right? So in other words, it needs to be enough concentration, I guess, between Hamptons and New York, Saint-Tropez
New York
and Nice.
And you get that. You got Monaco. If you think about Monaco, you're landing in the heart of Monaco. Monaco is the size of Central Park, so that's not that tough. Nice is an international airport, so that works really well for people going that route.
But I tell you what will change, though, too, is when you get these Jovies, and I want to take my 3 kids down to Princeton because there's a Princeton football game, and you can land right on the campus because they now say, hey, this little area, it's no noise. Not that it's your primary model, but that secondary charter part of your business is going to explode.
No,
right? Because then it's not. Then you don't need everyone's taking the same route. You can have a lot more. Bespoke
and it's
stuff.
and we see it with proximity right now. We have a West Side heliport, we have an East, Blade Lounge East, Blade Lounge West, and there is a dead zone where the Pan Am building used to be, where it's like, I'm just going to drive to the airport. But if you're sitting in Hudson Yards, Hudson Yards really is like a microcosm of City 2.0. We got the 7 train, we got scooters, we got bicycles, you got Ubers, and then you have a heliport that's literally inside Hudson Yards. Yeah. So we have people who go to they'll have lunch at, in Hudson Yards at 2:00, and they go, I got a 3:00 plane, and then walk to heliport.
I was the chairman of the board of the Hudson River Park Friends.
I'm well aware.
For long years. And there was this constant battle about them wanting to shut down the heliport. This heliport will not be shut. I was like over my dead body, but I'm not on my watch.
And I think you raise a really good point, because keeping this existing infrastructure so you can prove that when a Joby lands, it's quiet and people, I think it's going to be helpful to keep that open, then open up new stuff, right? So when you think about the market, because everyone always likes to say, oh, this is for the rich, this is for the rich. The way I look at it is layer one kind of urban mobility is like you kind of have underground, right? You have subways and stuff. Then you have above ground where you have buses, Ubers, soon robo-taxis, your own car, bicycles, scooters. Then there's this fourth layer, I would say, that is jets. The third layer, 500 to 3,500 feet, is unused. That is urban air mobility. That is where eVTOL are going to be. That's where the Jobies are going to be. If you can kind of monetize that third level, right? And it's very similar to the way, if you think about Manhattan grew up, where I mean, you had houses, they were spread apart, then they became more spread apart, all of a sudden they said, we have to go up. Well, that's what it has to be with transportation, with urban mobility.
What will be interesting is a place like the city, once we have lots of density, there'll have to be a new kind of set of rules for, you know, when you're flying down the river, you're on the right, you're flying up the river, you're on the left, just to keep.
Yeah.
Well, in New York City, I mean, you're 100% right. This is the most congested airspace in the country. You got Kennedy, LaGuardia, Newark, Teterboro, Kearny, Caldwell, Linden. I mean, there's so many, and you're,
Westchester, right.
you know, Westchester, and there are this constant talking on the radio between the towers and everything. The Bravo airspace is pretty big for LaGuardia and Kennedy, so you're almost always in
zone, yeah.
and Newark, you're almost always in space. And I think that in the beginning, it's not going to be Jetsons, you know, Mike flying his own, you know, Joby around town. Eventually, that will happen. It's
George
going to
Jetson?
be shared aircraft from common locations, hopefully much more convenient to everybody because there are more of these landing zones. So yeah, fine, we got Hudson Yards, we got the East Side, but you know, JP Morgan and all these companies are taking over Park Avenue. It's going to be a huge uptick in real estate there. Where do those guys go?
Yeah.
You know?
Where's the second best city in the United States for it, right? Because New York's concentrated. It's got a lot of point to point. Where would be the second best city?
There's literally nothing like it. In fact, I always like to say, Los Angeles is the greatest helicopter market in the world. Unfortunately, there's no place to land. So it doesn't really do you
Yeah,
any
because the
good.
traffic in Los Angeles can literally drive you insane.
Yeah, and they used to do it, and actually you may not know this, if you look at the cityscape, you know, of L.A., the buildings are flat on top because you had to have a helipad, which they eventually just switched to emergency service. They did some of the stuff, and it's just, I think there's an issue, and hopefully this moves away when we move to electric vertical aircraft, just the stigma. It's an icon of wealth.
Yeah.
And what we've been trying to do, and I think we've hammered that down into existence in New York and to a bit in Southern Europe, where like, look, guys, it's the price of an Uber. You know, it's, you know, yes, Mike Novogratz can afford it, but there are a lot of other people who aren't Mike Novogratz who can afford it too.
Right.
And once we get to electric, it'll even be more democratized.
I mean, if you break your business down, is it mostly like filling seats with, you know, disparate people, like basically like filling up a car, right? Like a bus, but it's a helicopter. Is it charter, or is it like Uber as Uber Eats, or are you moving, like I heard you're moving like medical organs,
well, I think,
and
you know,
maybe there's other things, I'm not sure.
As
Jewels,
I'm fond of saying, I bury the lead because 55% of Blade's business is moving human organs for transplant.
Okay.
We are the largest air transporter of human organs in the United States.
That shocks me.
So, you know, with over, you know, kind of 250 million of revenues, the majority is actually medical business.
did you even
It's, by the way, it's always the unsexy businesses, as Mike knows, that make all this credible money. Blade Passenger does well, but the medical business, I have to admit, it's, you know, terrific economics.
Yeah, well, I guess like you need to get a liver from A to B in like 3 hours. You can
Hard
pay
liver
anything,
lungs, hard liver
right?
lungs.
So, did you even, when you started the business, did you even think that that was one of the things that you were going to make money off, or
It's
were you just?
it's an interesting story because, you know, in the early days, I'm a big believer of, you know, I think founders and entrepreneurs, you know, founders specifically, if you really want to have the respect of your team, you need to be able to do everything your team can do as well as they can, if not better. That's a great benefit I noticed of, you know, being a founder as opposed to being shot in as an executive, because you have that respect from the people who are there. I can't code, but when it comes to anything in the aviation part, marketing part, I can do that.
Can you land a seaplane?
What?
Can you land the seaplane?
If I had to, I could. All right.
I'm told it's hard. So
The river is hard. It is a special. We train all our pilots for 4 weeks when they get here. It's nothing like landing on the East River, as you know. But one day I was literally working at the East 34th Street heliport, as I did to kind of just get the team going and keep things moving on a Friday. I looked up, and it was Langone Hospital. Sitting there, just right there. And I'm saying, you know what, there's got to be something to do with these guys. There just has to be. I was at the Medevac, I said this. And one of our early investors, one of my first investor was David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery now. And I knew he knew Kenny Langone. And I said, David, can you connect me with Kenny? He's like, I think there's got to be something to do with him. I said, sure. Connected me with him. I couldn't get in touch with him. Finally, after just calling and calling, they put me in touch with this head of procurement. So with services, I went to visit him. I said, look, we got a heliport right here, got a Blade Lounge. We're now the largest helicopter company in New York. Now it's the world in terms of moving people. What can we do together? Medevac. So stay away from Medevac. Insurance companies, you have to reimburse you. And if someone doesn't have the money for it, a lot of these guys go bankrupt. But what we really could use? We could use you to move organs. And I started thinking about it. I said, what do you pay to move, heart, liver, lungs? Well, we pay $2,500 for an ambulance to go from here to Teterboro. It takes 45 minutes. Then we get a G4, and that costs us about $40,000 or $50,000 to go to Philadelphia. Say it's Philadelphia Hospital. They recover the organs. Surgeons recover the organs. They get another ambulance back to Philadelphia Airport. Take the jet back, another ambulance back to NYU with the organ, and they do the transplant. And how much does that cost? Like the whole thing, I don't know, $75,000. I said, well, what if we took a helicopter straight from Langone and landed on top of Philadelphia Hospital? We could do it in half the time, and I think we could do it for $4,500. He's like, are you kidding me? It's like, let's try this. So we started that. It was a home run. Then we moved into jets. Now we have 22 dedicated Blade jets all across the nation. We're the largest air transport of human organs in the United States.
Crazy.
And we have ambulances. Well, I don't call ambulances lights and sirens SUVs. They're not. I have to be very technical here. And and people love doing it. We're saving lives.
And most of the
improving outcomes
hospitals
every
have a
day.
heliport.
What?
Most of the hospitals have a heliport.
A lot too. But also because of technology, you may not know this, it used to be an organ couldn't live out of the body for more than a couple hours. With perfusion technologies now, we did the world's longest flight from Maine to Alaska with an organ.
Wow.
And it's by keeping the organ alive in flight with a device that basically keeps blood flowing and keeps the organ alive. So more organs for people, better outcomes, and that's why it's now, again, we talk of multimodality.
Yeah.
Lights and sirens SUVs, helicopters for longer distance, and jets. And that's just totally separate. It's called Blade Med Mobility. And it's a completely separate business from Blade, but still part of the same public company.
Yeah. Yeah, always an important lesson, right? With founding companies, it's like you never, you might go in one direction, then it turns this way, turns that way.
And which is an issue with investing because people, how many times, I'm sure Mike's been in the same situation, you look at a company and you look what it's doing and you're saying, doesn't make any sense. Or it can't be that big. And then all of a sudden you see it 4 years later and it's completely different and they're crushing it and you're like, I didn't get it.
We're taking our company and we're pivoting it into data centers. It was fortuitous that we had a big Bitcoin mine that becomes a perfect AI data center.
And if you told me that when we went public, it was, the medical Blade Med Mobility was like basically part of the appendix of the IPO prospectus.
Let me ask you a silly question, just because I care about it. I can take a helicopter or a seaplane to the Hamptons, roughly the same price. Seaplane's a little faster, a little safer, probably, but they're both safe. How do people choose? Do they care?
It's a really good question. Generally, the rule of thumb, having moved hundreds of thousands of people at this point, you can get a helicopter person on a seaplane, but it's difficult to get a seaplane person on a helicopter. There is, and I would say it's a little bit of a myth. Generally, someone who's taking a seaplane says, okay, it's got wheels, it has pontoons, it has wings, and they do in their head, they said, okay, it can glide if it loses an engine, it can land on water, and it can go on it's land on a runway. True, but what people don't realize is it actually needs a lot of runway, and helicopters do something called, as you know, is a pilot auto-rotation. And all our pilots are taught auto-rotation, which means that you could literally shut off the engine and flare for up to 7 miles, depending on your altitude, and a great pilot could land on that table. So I think that that's the reason why psychologically a lot of people do it. I would say, people say, well, what should I take? In weather, seaplanes are great because they fly in instruments, and as opposed to what we call VFR, visual flight rules of a helicopter. Say if you think there's going to be weather.
And you don't have any IFR helicopter flights.
We do. The Sikorsky's larger helicopters.
I know you have
IFR.
them, but if I'm doing Blade, you won't take passengers on IFR, or will you?
Oh, we do.
You do?
Sikorsky's and things.
Got it.
So we have
Got it.
a bunch of different levels of helicopters that people can buy seats on and such. But so I think seaplanes. It's also an older demographic. I think it makes for a better Instagram on the helicopters for younger people.
The helicopter is sexier.
All right,
I
and
haven't had them both.
And by the way, and
And
also
flying people out, they feel good coming off the helicopter.
Yeah,
They feel
yeah.
okay coming off the seaplane.
It's a little bit of an older demo on the seaplane, and look, I'm not going to tell you how much our business was turbocharged by social media. It is not even a question.
That's so interesting, because you get the Central Park picture, you get the guy in front of the helicopter picture.
Yeah, and that's why, if you look at it, there were seaplanes, you see in a strut, you'll see our URL. You get a Blade wristband. People say that they have the sippy cup. So there's a lot of iconography in the lounges. You always want to make sure that logo.
I love your
somewhere.
lounge, at least the West Side.
Yeah,
lounge. I love
West
it.
Side's great. East Side's cool. There's an aqua lounge for seaplanes. It's fun.
Yeah. Did was this the first company you started?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And it was started at 49, so I was a late stage entrepreneur.
That is a late stage entrepreneur.
So yeah.
So before that you were in music, right? Sony?
I was
Like,
I was literally was an investment banker doing media mergers and acquisitions. Then I joined Sony in 2000 doing music, movies, television, a lot of music publishing. For many, many years. My family background, my dad sold I Love Lucy reruns in Latin America, and my grandfather started a record store that he turned into music publishing. And my goal always was, I got to get into the media business, and I didn't really know completely how to do it. And I just had this idea that if I somehow got into investment banking, which I did. It's a whole other story, by answering help wanted ads to go fix computers, fix the right guy's computer, luckily. I would morph into advising media companies and then hopefully get a job. And it did work. It did work out. That was the kind of, I'm not a visionary, but I'm a visualizer. And that was the visualization. That's where I wanted to get to. And then with Blade, I've shot 28 television commercials. I helped design the outfits for the staff that, what we call the FX, the flyer experience people, what the whole run of show is, because, I want everything from the marketing of it. When you go in, it's a run of show, just like, a movie. We want you to feel part of something and feel good about and create that emotional connection. So people say, well, what does it feel like to leave the entertainment business? I said, I feel more ensconced in entertainment in a way, because what is a great movie or a song do? It creates an emotional connection with you, and that's what I think about every day with our company.
So when you take the core competencies you learned prior to founding Blade, it's around a little bit around finance and just business, I guess, but around hospitality and kind of creating the experience.
You know what?
Or what?
This is what's interesting. Really, really, I'm so glad you raised that, because it kind of, I don't want to say it's a sore point, but it's something that I learned at a big company. If you're a finance guy, and I was an M&A and a finance guy. If you're an M&A and a finance guy, that's what you do. They'll say, okay, he's a finance guy. He's not a creative. So if I go to a marketing meeting for a movie, no one's going to listen to me. If you're a creative guy, you're not a, you're not a finance guy, right?
Yeah.
And so being an entrepreneur allows you to use muscles that you have, that your employer doesn't allow you to use. And that was so exciting to me. It says, I knew how to market. I knew how to create brands.
Yeah.
I remember you knew, because I've stumbled into, I would have never thought I was creative. And then later in life, I started doing this park in the Hamptons and a few other things. And I was like, I actually am pretty creative.
But you had a hunch and you wanted to do it.
But I would have never thought from a job perspective that I would allow myself to be on the creative side.
Yeah.
I mean, I throw a great part. There's plenty of things I've done that are creative, but it wasn't in my brain to think, I want to use that muscle. But now it is. But it's interesting that you
Yeah,
kind
no,
of
I really-
I also think people define creativity too narrowly, right? It's like people, their mental image of creativity is like, oh, you're an artist. You're like running around in like a Brooklyn warehouse. But finance can be creative, right? Marketing can be creative. Painting
I remember
can be
being
creative.
in.
Do you have any tattoos? Because that makes us creative, Dan.
Yeah, I'm scared of needles. I faint with needles. I faint with blood tests. But I remember being in a marketing meeting at Sony Pictures for a movie. It was actually, I think it was The Social Network, based on Facebook, and everyone's talking about the one sheet, which are the posters and the names and everything. And I remember that I couldn't give any ideas because it came from the suit. And John Calley, who ran the studio, may he rest in peace, when I had ideas, which sometimes they were used, I'd have to go to him directly because it couldn't be my idea. Because that'd be, by definition, it'd be gone. So I just knew this was something. And then also, look, as I said, I have a long-standing family background, and it just felt something that was in my DNA, but you couldn't use it. And I think that's what's great about being an entrepreneur, because other people may not see that way. It's too easy for a big company to put you in a slot.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I did was the ethos at Blade is very much that, like, okay, you may be a finance guy. You want to try something else?
Yeah.
We'll let you try that.
Yep.
If you fuck it up, we're going to, you're not going to last long.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll let you try that.
Yeah.
So, and also the discipline that it comes from a big company you want to keep, but you want to get rid of the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. These are the things that I love taking from a big company.
Yeah.
There's certain things you want to take from a big company and bring, and certain things you want to get rid of.
Yeah. What did you feel like? How did that feel when you'd been largely a paycheck guy for a couple of decades, right? Like, take us through that. Like, when you actually left, right? So you said you incubated it first.
Yeah.
Right. So what was that like? What was your calculus like, or your emotions like, when you actually made the jumps? And I'm not going to
Did you have enough
as
in your nest egg that you had a few years that you didn't care
Yeah,
about
well,
money?
it's the two things. I remember doing an interview once, and they said, "God, you had this, you had this idea, and you took this huge leap, and who knew it wasn't going to work?" I said, "Actually, I didn't have any faith. I started, I incubated. I had no idea it was going to. Once it worked, I said, sounds like a good idea." So, by the way, it's very rare you can incubate something, while you're working, because it wasn't really a side hustle. It was a real company. And at the time I was at Warner, I was working for Len Blavatnik. He was aware of it and supportive. But yes, I think being older is helpful in a bunch of ways. You've made a lot of non-lethal mistakes. You've learned a lot. But also, when you start something, you're not eating ramen noodles. Right, and I
not
waited.
ramen, though. I love a ramen noodle.
Okay, but you don't have to eat ramen noodles. Is a better way of saying it. So my view really was, okay, I'm 49. I don't know how many more years before I'm going to want to start another company, but I feel like I know enough. Feel like I have enough credibility and self-confidence, but also I don't feel like I have to change my lifestyle if all of a sudden I'm going to go from having a pretty senior job and good paycheck to taking a bit of a flyer for a couple of years, and now it's our 10th year, so it's been a longer, been a long run.
Yeah, always is.
Let me ask you some fun questions.
Sure.
Like, the cool thing about helicopters is you're flying sexy people around to some degree. Not everyone's sexy, but so any fun celebrity drama on your helicopters that you're allowed to talk about without getting blackballed from all celebrity helicopter flights?
There are a lot. The first one is that there's definitely a lot of celebrities. And
I realized it was a dumb question
there's
halfway through asking.
There's a lot.
It.
Also, you can imagine FAA, security, people who are flying us I can't talk about. But there has been a fair amount of stuff. I think going back, the strangest thing that I saw was there was a celebrity who was from Los Angeles who had a house in the Hamptons and had a dog that had some issues, mental issues. And the dog had a shrink in Los Angeles. And they found a shrink in New York. So we did fly the dog on a weekly basis from Memorial Day to Labor Day for the dog shrink appointment. That's probably the one that's
pretty good.
Reminds me that comes to mind.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was strange flying people just for their own appointments, but but people love their dogs. What can I say?
In
More
New York
power to
especially,
them.
this might be the dog capital of the world. People love dogs in New
yeah.
York. My wife loves her dog, Pisco. Shout out to Pisco.
How do you handle safety, like just in terms of training everybody and also like the marketing aspect of it? Like if you think through helicopters in particular,
Kobe,
a lot of people are just like, oh, I don't
scared.
want to get on a helicopter. Yeah, there's a lot of fear around helicopters.
Yeah,
Like,
did you see
much-
your ridership go down after the Kobe Bryant thing?
It's interesting. We were operating in LA at the time. LAPD was grounded. We grounded. And it was a really unfortunate situation because, not only should they have not been flying in that weather,
Yeah.
they weren't even, while the pilot was instrument rated, the helicopter was not registered properly for flying, could not fly under instruments. So they flew without instruments. And that has to happen with something that is, this may be a little bit too in the weeds for your podcast, but owners of helicopters pressuring pilots is a big issue.
Yeah.
You have a guy you work for and he hasn't used it that much, or he fly, and all of a sudden they say we can't fly, and the guy gets annoyed. You want to please him. Very difficult.
I'll tell you a funny story. This is a funny story, and this shout out to Pat Tierney. So, my stick buddy in flight school stayed in the Army and became one of the Army's top pilots. He was in Task Force 160. That's called the Night Stalkers. They're the guys that do all the special ops missions. Complete stud pilot. And he came to work with me on a bunch of stuff, including our planes, our aviation. And he said he's at G4 school, which was the hardest school or G5 school, the hardest school he'd been to. He's from all the Army schools, Gulfstream school. He was shocked how hard it was. But they asked him, what do you do when the owner is pressuring you and giving you all kinds of shit to try to fly when you don't want to fly? You think it's not safe? He said, oh, that's easy. I just call his mom. It was a great answer.
No,
But that's it. Listen, the one thing that, having been a helicopter owner and flyer and a pilot even big portion of my life, 99% of helicopter crashes are pilot error. And they're pilot error often from judgment. And it's not the helicopter breaks. Once in a blue moon, there's a mechanical failure, blue moon. And so experienced pilots that are well-trained, that have a checklist, kind of sound checklist, you get nervous, that do the same thing the same way is what you want to fly.
And there's also, I think there's one fatality for every 135,000 hours of Part 135 flight, which is what we do. And so actually, as Mike knows, the rules for flying people in a service are much more stringent than if you own your own aircraft. The FAA gives you much more latitude to do what you want, but and I deal with, we have cancellations for weather, all the time. And, I remember, and I always try to get in front of a customer. I'll be at a lounge and have some guys scream, I can't believe you're not flying and da-da-da-da-da. And it looks sunny to me. And like, they don't realize that 20 miles out, there's just a wall of fog. And, I tell our team, our attitude has to be, tell our flyers, I'd rather have you, on the ground yelling me here than in the sky, yelling at me from there. Or why am I in the air?
Yeah. Do you think about it a lot in your marketing, or it just is what it is?
Well, I think we do. It's education. Like we talked about, most people don't realize helicopters auto-rotate. Most people don't realize that second pilots are largely there for navigation.
Yeah.
Most people think...
Do you only fly two pilots?
What? No, seaplanes are two pilots. Sikorsky's are two pilots for navigation, and our core Bell 407 is one pilot. And it's very,
And you have
weather dependent.
Do you have single engine and twin engine?
Both. And and also most people don't realize the second engine is not really it's not about redundancy. It was originally about carrying weight, right? And so there's a lot of misconceptions about it. But I think with education, it helps. And then once you get people realizing that safety is your core priority, we have a 7-member safety team. So if you want to become a company that works with Blade, everything from, forget maintenance logs, I got financial wherewithal, minimum pilot hours. And as I think Mike's right. I said, we're looking for experienced pilots, over 800 hours
Yeah.
that understand the most complicated airspace in the
Yeah.
country, which is this greater New York
Yeah.
area.
How do you deal with like efficiency, meaning like packing your helicopters, right? Like obviously if you have one person on paying $800 or $1,000, not the same as having 6 or 7, right? Do you have a lot of flex in that system? I know you guys are asset light. You don't own your own aircraft, right? For the
Only
most
on the
part?
medical side, yeah.
Only
Not
on the medical
not
side.
the
Okay.
passenger side, yeah.
So like, is it something like you feel that on an hourly basis and you're like, put a couple more helicopters on? Is it something that the week before you have to kind of predict, oh, this is going to be a
No,
busy
it's
weekend?
real. It's real time off the app and off the web, and we got tons of data. We know when we need more helicopters ready for us, so for our operators. But and I think you were basically talking about utilization.
Yeah.
And so it really
Yeah.
becomes, how many helicopters are we adding?
Uh-huh.
Now, is it possible that you're going to have something to the airport where there's one person flying? Sure. And you fly no matter what. You never fly,
Yeah.
and something will happen. But in the rush hour, you're going to have 6 people on it.
Yeah.
And you need that consistency. People need to go on the app and know they can get in a helicopter in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And they also need to know, which we now do, and most of you guys probably not even know this, that our focus is, if you're using us, say, to go to the airport,
Yeah.
you're going to get there the fastest, safest way. Right? So if it's a helicopter and the weather's good, you get in a helicopter. If it's the weather's bad,
Yeah.
you automatically get a car.
Right,
So
right.
you don't even have to think about it. It's like, I know I want to get to the airport as fast as possible. I'm going to use Blade. It'll be in the air. It'll be in a car.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
What do you get? Like, what's your, what do you call it? Optimization? No, what?
Utilization.
Utilization. What, like in the apartment industry, for instance, like 5% vacancy is considered normal. It's like, it would be the equivalent of like 95% utilization. But in other retail, it might be 90% utilization, relative to how vacancy and occupancy works. What's your utilization that you shoot for?
Well, for leisure routes, it can be 5 out of 6 on a helicopter and 6 out of 8 on a seaplane, is what we get.
Yeah.
And I really look at the break even. So for airport, which is going like literally every 20 minutes, we can break even 2.5 people, 2 people around there.
Yeah.
So I look at it that way. As long as you have, at the end of the day, you're having profitable flights.
So you look at it as like a break. What's the booking? How long before? Like my booking window for a Blade is probably somewhere between like 24 hours and 6 hours. Honestly, like maybe 48. Like in other words, if I'm somebody that puts it off not to the last minute, but pretty far, because there's usually a lot of options. And
Yeah.
if worse comes to worse, I'll take get an Uber or something like this. And honestly, that never happens really. I just might have to sort my schedule an hour or two later or earlier, because you guys usually have a lot of options from New York to the Hamptons. But what's a typical booking window? Like, what's your average booking window
Well,
for
it's
Hamptons?
interesting. It depends for the product. So for Hamptons is probably within 24 hours, but for airport it could be anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. It's really used more as an Uber substitute. It's a guy who's in a meeting and he's like, you know what? He's in a pitch meeting, and he doesn't want to say, hey, guy, to his potential client, hey, I got to leave to go to the airport, but my team can take care of it from here. They sit there on their phone. They give me a second. They book the Blade, and they're there in 5 minutes, and that's
Right.
how they do it. So it's very depends on that. And it's a direct function of distance. The shorter the distance, the shorter the booking window. Just
Right.
like for a private jet, we have some guys that do jet charter for our clients, and those tend to be not very last minute.
Are you guys in the jet business in a big way, or
It's about 30 million of revenues now. I think it's a pretty big business. It's something that because we operate so many jets for medical, gives us a little throw weight in the industry. And also I really like, again, the same way, that level of hospitality and personalization and having people on the ground when you're taking off, when you're landing. I wanted to put that kind of special sauce in jets, and it's working. It's not a core. Our focus is urban air mobility and medical, but the jet businesses, we like it.
Yeah.
Let's spin back to the future, because I like the future.
Yeah.
The quad pod helicopters, the drones, the
eVTOL,
yeah.
What do you call them?
Well, I call them electric vertical aircraft. Other people call it eVTOL, which is more of scientific electric vertical takeoff or landing aircraft.
Okay. Electric
are they-
vertical takeoff.
I think-
EVA, I like better. Electric vertical
I
aircraft.
think I've
Okay,
read,
EVA.
but I could be wrong. They're already operating in Dubai. Or maybe
They're
it's just
going to
testing.
be. They're in China right now operating.
Got it.
They will be in the Middle East probably by the end of 25, early 26.
And when do we think here?
It's a really good question. I think post certification and you got commercialization. It could be as early as late 27. But they'll be using existing infrastructure. Remember, you're
Right.
going to have a cohabitation phase. Well, you'll go to Blade Lounge West and you'll see an eVTOL and you'll see a Sikorsky
And-
right
and-
next to each other.
The advantage of them broadly is noise, cost. They're cheap. Like again, to buy
Not
a-
cheaper yet.
To buy a
Will
Twin
be.
Star cost you $5 million, or
I mean, like let's say that, Bell 407. People don't really do Twin Stars anymore. So a Bell 407 probably like $3.5 million.
right.
$3.5 million
Dollars.
What?
used or new?
New-ish.
Newish. Okay, yeah.
It might be four, and then I think we'll be at the same price for helicopters. And then eVTOL will be many less moving parts, so less maintenance and hopefully lower cost over time.
It should be much lower cost, I
Yeah,
think.
over time, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're still piloted the same way right now, right? I mean, I'm sure people are working on autonomous things, but we're talking about EVAs that are piloted.
Yes, these are piloted. Yeah,
Yeah,
And
okay.
and I think how is it going to change? I think is exactly what you say. Your mission is not going to change in terms of you'll go to the airport in five minutes. I think it's going to be a while before you get to fly 100 miles. But what's interesting to me again from a consumer, from a customer perspective. If you think about a helicopter, right? What is a Sikorsky? It's a Black Hawk helicopter that's smaller. So literally a bunch of guys at, I don't know, Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, they looked at a big Sikorsky and they said, a big Black Hawk, and said, I got an idea. Why don't we put leather seats in it and sell it to companies?
Yeah.
But when you go into a helicopter, it is not a user-friendly experience. You're stepping on this thing that says "Don't step." You go and you got wires over you. You're putting on a headset. You can barely see the pilots.
Yeah.
It was meant for oil and gas, military, everything. Sort of tons of reasons. So
Yep.
what's interesting about things like Joby is like these are for consumers from the ground up.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a much more comfortable.
Much more comfortable, yeah. It's even interesting when you start to think about like automobiles and some of the self-driving things. Once you take, I know this is not exactly what you're talking about, but once you take the driver out of the equation, you can kind of reconfigure the car in all these other ways, right? You can have two bench seats facing each other, right? You don't, like the whole mode of like a driver is here and then passengers are behind. So I guess if you're retooling a helicopter from scratch, you still have pilots. I'm not saying that, but like a lot of the
Autonomous
things
will be here at some point.
yeah, but a lot of the objections or kind of non-thought of the consumer, you can kind of put in, make it like basically a slicker experience just because it's being designed
From the ground up
from the
for
ground
a
up,
consumer.
yeah.
And I think that is definitely exciting.
Yeah.
But you also have to deal with, distance, how much weight can it take, some of those things. Okay.
Yeah. What's a business that's got the same challenges? Like, what other businesses do you look at that you're like, oh, I kind of understand? Is there any analogs to your business in terms of like you're basically asset light, you're renting or leasing most of your aircraft, right? You got a lot of human capital.
You have hourly commitments and such for the aircraft.
Your brand makes a big difference in terms of like.
Great brand.
Yeah, it is a great brand. And in terms of like both recognition but also pricing, or is there not much competition in your?
I think there's no question that, especially when you're thinking about chartering your own aircraft, people feel comfortable and they're willing to pay a premium for it. And, it's people aren't, yes, on jets and things, people may look for discounts for what we do. People want reliability, trusted name. So there's definitely a brand premium there.
Makes sense, actually. Because you read one article about some janky, helicopter operation. You're like, I want the one that I trust.
There are places to cut corners.
Yeah.
This is probably not one of them.
Yeah. I think Blade 2, and I think you got a great app. It's really easy to use, I would say. Like, to me, that's like one of the best things about it. Like, there's not a lot of friction. Like, even if you want to, Uber's got a great app, fine. Okay, that's a part of their story. But if you want to talk about like most jets, right, or jet company, now it's a bigger investment. It's not I'm saying chartering a jet, it's not $1,000. It might be 10 or 20 or 30, depends what you're doing. But I'm saying there's a lot of friction in that equation, right? It's like brokers, different jets, different things, right?
Yeah, the Blade app's easy.
It's the Blade app's easy, and it is true that like to me it like operates more like you're on it for a short period of time, so it operates like an Uber in that you want it clean, you want it safe, but you're not like investing in the thing. You're not impressing anybody. When you're chartering a jet, even there's a little bit more of like who's going to be on this, how long am I going, how comfortable do I want to get? Do you know what I'm saying by that? It's like it's a little bit beyond just pure A to B utility, right?
Yeah.
Which is what I think what Uber is and what Blade is. And so you're like, your app is like super easy to use, and it like makes something that's basically
Well, the experience
utility.
is easy too. You get to the lounge, they give you a drink. You
Yeah,
get on
everything about it.
You get on the.
You're right.
I mean, I actually
That
get
was
free
the
drinks
idea.
from your lounge, even though I don't use your. They
That's
just
fine.
assume I'm going, and they give me a drink, and then I get on my own seatplate.
Yeah.
So I probably owe you $37.
That's good.
Yeah.
By the way, it's the best
It's true.
customer acquisition tool. And originally, when we started, we said, well, I want you to know we're stopping people who are not flying Blade from getting a refreshment at the lounge. I'm like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
That just proves that whoever they're flying with is not as good. Let them come to the lounge. They'll fly us next time.
Yeah.
Now, it's not true for someone who's got their own aircraft like Mike, but for everybody else who's flying somebody else, for sure.
Oh, it is funny. Little things people love.
Yeah.
Free
Little
candy.
things people love.
Yeah. Surprise and delight. You're all about creating, a narrative. It's funny because we always had, years ago when we started, we had we got a lot of crap for it, so we took them away. But in the beginning, we had old Playboy magazines and all these weird vintage magazines in the lounges. And we took away the centerfolds, and it's almost like the old story, like, oh, I only read it for the articles. And 5 years after we did that, someone said to me, because I met him in Europe, and he said, I have a question for you. He goes, I took Blade about 5 years ago. And I was in the lounge, and you guys had these vintage Playboy magazines. Why did you have it? And I said, because you're asking me about it right now, 5 years later. It's just like these little things that people think about, and you create this narrative.
And
of a
especially
certain
for our
time.
age, roughly the three of us are similar ages. That was like, you're 12 years old, and that was the thing. It was it.
And you did it for the articles. And by the way, some of the greatest writers, Pulitzer Prize winning writers, were writing for Playboy back then.
How long were you guys operating before you went public?
2014, they went public. 21.
How was that?
It's different. It's definitely different.
Every quarter.
Every
doing this quarter?
Every quarter. But also, I think there is, and you try so hard to not rip the soul out of a company when you go public, because you're so focused on profitability, which we've achieved finally. You're so focused on growth. You're so focused on optimization. You don't want to lose what makes the company special.
Yeah.
And that's the push-pull. That's the challenge, and threading that needle. And it's honestly, it reminds me, we used to always say in entertainment, it's sort of like what's that intersection between art and commerce, right? Where you can create enough great art, but you're not going to lose your shirt.
Right.
Right? You're going to make some money.
Yeah.
And we have I see that same, again, going back to what did you learn and what did you have in your own job in media, like how do you apply that? That's something that is a push-pull every day.
What makes you most excited about Blade going forward, like in the next couple of years?
I think is without question. I think that this transition that is upon us, where we could actually even have intra-city air mobility travel, where I'm in Midtown, I want to go to the East Side. I'm on the West Side, I want to go to Wall Street, and then also even it's so funny when you think about if you go around airports, almost any airport in the country. You'll see, as you get close to the airport, you'll see something that says park and fly, right?
Yep.
It's like usually a big parking lot that's around.
Yeah.
When you study traffic, which I unfortunately do a lot of, as you imagine, you look at Manhattan, for suburbanites, whether they're in New Jersey or Long Island, the longest part of their travel is the last 10% of the miles. It's as everybody goes through a tunnel or a bridge, and it's kind of like sucking concrete through a straw.
Right.
All right. That's how difficult it is for all that traffic.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking forward to are finding sites in New Jersey and around Long Island and Queens where people can go park their cars. Could be a shopping mall that went bankrupt, and getting them in eVTOLs. They park their car and they're in 3 minutes in the city.
the city,
We're dealing with
yeah.
congestion. They're not bringing their cars and they're not paying
Yeah.
$75 a day. And in fact, as a precursor to that, we already started a program where if you're a commuter, for $95, again, if you don't have bags, you can go park your car for free at Kennedy. If you live in, say, the Five Towns, Long Island,
Yeah.
jump on a Blade, get to the city to the west side for a meeting or for a show with your wife or husband or whatever.
Yeah.
Or you're in New Jersey, go to Newark, park your car, and that's $95. That's kind of the precursor. But what am I excited about?
Yeah.
Getting that kind of park and fly, getting that point where all those tubes, tunnels, bridges that
Yeah.
people can kind of fly over that. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be big.
And and I guess you take the noise out of the equation. You just have a lot more not in my backyard, and you can start to convince people that
Yeah.
this is a
Yeah, it's the
benefit
noise.
for
I mean,
like
even the
it
Hamptons,
is.
originally it was you could have flown general aviation. So I used to fly literally like 10 feet off the water because that's what I love doing. And then my pilots would get all nervous because the pilots voluntarily agreed to fly a certain route at a certain height, just so they didn't shut down all the helicopters because everyone was bitching about the noise. And then, why East Hampton's always a fight because people moved close to the airport because the real estate was really cheap because it was by an airport. And then once they had houses there, they bitched about the airport.
Yeah, I have a lot of people who come to me and say, like, my God, the noise around the airport. I have a house that's nearby, and I go, what street are you on? And they go, Airport Road. I go, when you bought your house, did you think that when it was named? The airport's been there since the 1920s or 30s. So pretty much everybody who's living there made a conscious decision
To live near the airport.
to live near the airport.
Yeah.
Now, you want to fly neighborly, and we have routes, and we have altitudes, and we do the best we can. And I think if we can just get to that transition point where we have this quiet aircraft,
Yeah, it changes everything.
it changes everything.
It really does. It's interesting how quick the noise rattles people.
Yeah.
And everyone's
But
impacted.
I tell you what,
But
as
you know
a
what else?
pilot, it's
Yeah.
so much more fun flying close to the ground because when you're at 1,500 feet, it feels like you're going really slow.
Yeah.
And when you're at 5 feet, it feels like you're going a billion miles an hour.
Yeah.
So if you like adrenaline, flying right above the water, it just is the coolest feeling on the
Yeah.
planet.
I think also Blade is like
do that,
democratizing.
though. Blade
but
No,
it's-
we don't do
it's-
that, no.
It's like
Safe
democratizing the helicopter a little bit because
Yeah.
it's noise, but it's also like considered a little bit elitist, right? Because it's always like private, corporate, or rich
Yeah,
or
Blade is
something like that.
democratizing.
So I think if you put those two things together, kind of mitigate the noise and democratize the price, right?
Yeah, and I think
you got
airport helps a lot with
much
that.
bigger.
So
and the
many more
airport
people
does.
have been on helicopters because Blades than there were beforehand.
Yes,
Unless
and-
they had a rich friend, they weren't.
Yeah.
gonna be
Yeah.
on. I broke the news about the new coin, but why don't you?
What do you mean broke the news about it?
The coin with our picture on it.
Wait, are we waiting for Mel?
Mel's he's sitting right there. He's
Oh,
missed
what happened to him?
he's missed the whole podcast.
Hey, Mel.
Mel's secretary told him it was
All right,
4
man, my
o'clock.
time to see. It's all right.
His
Glad,
se-
glad,
his
thanks for
secretary-
stopping by.
Responsibility.
Thanks for stopping
His
by.
secretary told him it was 4 o'clock, not 3 o'clock. He's here on time for 4. Well, he's even late for 4, but that's all right.
I've been then I went to Mercer Street.
Wow, it's been a journey.
My apologies, man.
No.
Thank you for coming.
Dave, you got the coin.
Well, we got to hear from Mel first.
This guy gotta go. I feel like shit.
No,
So
all
I
right.
say thank you for coming.
All right.
I messed up today, guys. Traffic was really bad. You should take Blade.
I
Lucky.
think, you know what? Couldn't have said it better myself.
But at the end of every conversation, we basically leave our audience with your ounce of gold. And so we used to give out coins that somehow I got designated to buy, and they were just coming from like the Canadian Mint. But now we got someone to sponsor us. And
JM Bullion, #1 gold retail distributor in America, in Canada. If you want to buy gold, buy it from JM Bullion. Thank you.
and so
guys.
that's a solid gold business untitled coin.
And just
With
so,
our- with our
just because
good-looking
I've been
mugs on it.
hot as a
And-
pistol on my gold predictions, we started gold was 1,800. Today's gold is roughly around 3,150.
Which he predicted.
Per ounce.
And I actually think, you took out 3,000, which was the old high. You're in what's called price discovery.
Yeah.
We don't know where it's going to go. Donald Trump's tariff announcement yesterday we spent a whole episode previewing it, and we'll probably spend another episode talking about it later. But from a investing perspective, it's a giant bell ringing to maybe sell the dollar, that this is a little bit at the end of globalization. You can have more isolation. Asian central banks, the Russian central banks around the world are buying gold. Gold could potentially go to $10,000.
So
Not this year, but it's one of these things that once it takes out a level, you don't know where it's going to go. And so hold on to your coin, don't lose it.
I absolutely will not.
So we just gave you $1 million.
And in the meantime, but for that, you have to leave us with your kind of like ounce of gold.
Final ounce of
Your
gold.
final ounce of gold. Like what you
Young
want,
entrepreneur
what you
out
want
there.
to tell the audience, the young entrepreneur out there
Young
about.
entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Or blade rides forever.
I think what do I tell young people out there? Answer your phone, work from the office. Pick up your phone. Don't do remote work. Learn from the people around you. Pick up your phone. When I think about people who've been successful in my business, even when I was at Sony or Warner's or First Boston, the people who picked up their phone and were accessible, those are the ones that
Instead of
got
just
ahead.
text that.
Yeah,
That's great.
or text. I'm fine on text, but and also don't think about work-life balance. Think about work-life continuum. Enjoy what you do. It should all. If you can make it blend in, you can be happy. You will win.
That's 2 ounces, but we're only giving you 1 coin.
Great. Damn it! I was hoping for a second coin.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Rob. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. It was fun.
Appreciate you
Yeah.
taking the time.
It's great.
Mel enjoyed it.
Mel
Yeah,
enjoyed
Mel.
it. All right.
I will. I'm
Lucky-
looking
lucky
at
you're
some
so
notes.
charming. Give us
Okay.
give us the close at least.
I'm just kind of all over the place today. But we got Rob on Blade, which I've used several times. Dave actually took me on my first Blade. Mike, not so much. But like, subscribe, comment, and sorry for missing this episode. But
Guys,
Came
let's
at
make
the
this the
end.
most watched episode of all time so we can tease the shit out of Mel for the next year.
Do your part.
I would like that, actually.
Over and out.